Tonight, on safari to the killing grounds of Africa. We track down the man responsible. Wildlife in abundance. Wildlife which has survived partly because it has little commercial value. Unfortunately, that isn't true of the elephant. You have to walk a long way in Africa these days to find a live elephant because of the awesome value of their tusks. No one so far has tried to follow the trail from the killing fields to the city offices 10,000 miles away, where the bloody business is controlled. More than 1 million elephants have been illegally slaughtered since 1980. A few lucky orphans, like 8-month-old Dicker, make it to this animal sanctuary in Kenya. What's now happening to the elephants is a Pan-African scandal, according to Tanzania's Director of Wildlife, Costa Malay.
It's the greatest land mammal we have. It's loved by young and old alike, and one of the most beautiful animals and one of the most intelligent animals alive today. So it would be a pity for it to go, really. And if we work together, we should be able to save it.
But if you don't?
If we don't, it will go, as surely as the dodo.
And those fears are now being realized. 10,000 babies like little Dicker are butchered every year. Dicker is bottle-fed every 3 hours from behind a sheet of canvas that substitutes for the comfort of a mother's belly. His mother was killed along with an entire herd, their faces cut off with chainsaws to get at the ivory.
This tiny tusk was torn from the carcass of a baby elephant barely a year old. So high is worldwide demand for ivory now that it's worth more than silver, and 80% of it has been poached. This is the average size of tusks now being traded, a pitiful 8 pounds. Its previous owner would have been a teenager, barely old enough to breed. And you don't see many of these anymore, because in most parts of Africa, mature elephants, perhaps 60 or 70 years old, have been virtually wiped out.
Many African countries now face elephant genocide driven by greed. In Zambia, as elsewhere, rangers train to pursue the poachers. But it's a belated rearguard action. Ill-funded and ill-equipped like most of their colleagues across the continent, they stand little chance against the big players in the Ivory League.
The contents of this shed represents more than 3,000 slaughtered elephants. Earlier this year, there were 20,000 more. Poached tusks confiscated by the Tanzanian authorities here and put up for auction. And there's a very interesting signature in this visitor's book. It turns out to be that of the man who eventually acquired the lot. He's the world's largest trader in illegal ivory, and his name is Poon.
Finding a Poon prepared to put anything down on paper, especially a signature, is as difficult as discovering an elephant family they have left in peace. The Poons, there's a whole family of them, never pull the trigger on a poacher's gun, and instead use scores of frontmen to operate their dirty but highly profitable business. Over months of investigation, we tracked down all 4 brothers, but the man who actually runs the business, the man we targeted, was Tat Hong Poon. T.H. Poon's headquarters are here in Hong Kong. Hong Kong's the center of the world's ivory trade. The Worldwide Fund for Nature's man on the spot is David Melville.
Everywhere I go around the world, there's one name which keeps cropping up in relation to the ivory trade, particularly the trade in poached ivory. And that's the name of Mr. T.H. Poon. But so far, nobody's really been able to pin anything on him very substantial. He's an exceedingly clever man. He operates behind front men and middlemen, and he shifts his operations from country to country. And this makes it all the more difficult to really work out how large a dealer he is.
The ivory carving factories of Hong Kong consume several hundred tons a year. Mr. Poon supplies most of it. There is a system which is supposed to control the world ivory trade. It involves numbering every raw tusk. The numbers are issued by CITES, the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species. But the first thing that happens when a tusk is carved is that the number is removed. The number may be genuine or false, but worked ivory is untraceable. The original documentation is often forged, and the raw ivory may have been laundered through several countries. That comes as no surprise to long-time elephant campaigner Prince Sadruddin Aga Khan.
The problem is that you've got corruption everywhere, Roger. I mean, corruption is not a thing which is the privilege, the exclusive problem of the third world. It's not because people are poor that they're necessarily more corrupt. Rich people are sometimes much more corrupt than the poor.
Here in Hong Kong, they even smuggle legal ivory. If they get caught, they produce a perfectly genuine CITES certificate like this one and say there's been some kind of bureaucratic mistake. If they don't get caught, they use the same certificate again, but this time they bring in poached ivory with it. And if they don't want the certificate, they sell it, which is how we came by this one.
It's no easy task patrolling the busiest harbour in the world. Despite the best efforts of the Hong Kong Customs Service, illegal ivory continues to flood in. And the trade that starts with the distant slaughter of elephants has a low priority compared to drugs, though occasionally vessels like this one have been caught with poached ivory aboard. This ivory has legal paperwork, but even so, most of it would have been poached initially, and every clunk means a dead elephant. There are 863 dead elephants in this showroom, worth about £2.5 million. It was difficult and expensive to come by because it was legal ivory. Dominic Ng resents Poon's easy illegal trade, but can't bring himself to name him.
No, I think everyone knows, but better you name it.
You mean Mr. Poon?
Well, he is most famous, I think.
But what do you think should happen to people like him? How can they be controlled?
Well, hopefully he can behave himself. That's what we can do.
But he hasn't for years and years, has he?
But what can we do? What can you do? You see that if the whole world cannot stop him, what can we do?
Mr. Poon's only readily visible presence in Hong Kong is a small but exclusive shop, Tat Hing Ivory. Poon is a feared figure in the ivory trade. This is Lee Chat, chairman of the Hong Kong Ivory Traders Association. He agreed to talk to us about the Mr. Big of illegal ivory. And then changed his mind on camera following anonymous threats and a car through his shop window. As ever with Mr. Poon, no real proof that he was behind it. So we set out to find hard evidence and first-hand witnesses. In the poorest parts of Africa, subsistence poaching is a tradition. Now poaching has gone commercial, organized and financed from the outside. Both elephants and poachers have become the victims of exploitation. Villagers risk their lives for pennies. The ivory and the real profit is exported, often under the noses of the authorities. While we were in Tanzania, 70 tons of ivory, nearly 8,000 dead elephants, were smuggled out to Dubai. The Tanzanians tried to get it back and failed.
Poon is an international businessman who works in a big way. There is a lot of money involved, as you're no doubt aware. Just this shipment of 70 tons was worth $15 million. And what is to stop Poon putting another 5 to make sure he gets his ivory? And for countries like ourselves, it's difficult to fight him because he has this enormous amount of money. He is good at greasing palms and gets away with it.
The ivory slipped out of Dar Harbour in a sailing dhow, was transshipped under cover of darkness and run up the coast to the Gulf state of Dubai with seemingly genuine documents. But how? Eventually, the wall of silence around Poon and his close associates was breached by Zuli Rahantullah, who has traded ivory with Mr. Poon for many years.
Once the ivory is put into the ship, and once the ship leaves the dock of Dubai, immediately the documents has been retransferred on another names, which he shows to the Dubai government is different name. When it is on the board, it is different name. This is his common practice.
So he plays games with paperwork.
Oh yes, he plays games of many ways.
Poon's ivory staging post between Africa and Hong Kong was and still is Dubai, where he'd also financed 2 carving factories in the free trade zone where filming is forbidden. They've been closed down following international pressure. But Mr. Poon controls a number of other factories, like this one in Singapore. We got into it by posing as ivory dealers ourselves and were told of yet another factory nearby due to open soon. According to Zuli Rahantullah, Poon is always one step ahead of the law.
He knows the laws of the countries, each and every country where he goes, very nicely. He learned the laws first, then he tried to play his part.
So he knows the laws and then he breaks them.
Yes, he can do it with his power of money. And he is a very dirty man. In every angle, he has no principles of life. He has no principle of business. His principle is only one, is money.
Poon's profits have purchased this entire street of high-rise flats and business premises in the center of Hong Kong. He's estimated to be making as much as $1 million a week. There's nothing like the delicacy of ivory carving, and nothing like it for multiplying profits. Finished ivory is worth 100 times more than raw tusks. And remember, Poon is in the business from slaughter to shop window, and the market is international. It's hard to believe that something this small could threaten the African elephant. It's a little Japanese seal used for signing checks and letters and so on. Current demand is for around 1 million a year. That's 2,500 dead elephants. But now there's a new emperor, and a new emperor means a new seal. Demand is rising to record levels, and that's more bad news for the elephant. But good news for Mr. Poon.
That man has bought billions of dollars of ivory from Africa, and that is through Bujumbura, Tanzania, Zaire, and Kenya as well.
Illegal ivory.
Illegal ivory, yes. Illegal ivory. He don't like legal. If you got legal, he can finish you up.
Mr. Poon, he says, isn't interested in legal ivory. It costs twice as much and is difficult to obtain in the quantities Poon requires. In most parts of Africa, he has the market completely sewn up.
It's really very much like drugs. It's extremely well organized. There are many ramifications all over the world. It's very difficult for the authorities, whoever they are, wherever they are, to come to grips with the problem. The elephant is going, and at the present rate, which is close to 300 a day, I don't see how it can possibly last.
A pitiful few survivors end up in Daphne Sheldrick's elephant orphanage.
When these little babies come in, they're so grief-stricken that they can't sleep for about 4 months. They have nightmares, they can't rest, they're restless, they're listless, they don't even want to live. And that's the toughest job we have, to persuade them that life still goes on and that it's worth living. I just think it's appalling to kill elephants for their ivory. Everyone can live without ivory. Nobody needs it. It doesn't serve any purpose except bangles and baubles and things like that.
Buying ivory means killing elephants, and that the ivory looks white, but it is in fact bloody ivory. And it keeps a lot of rather nasty characters and shady characters going, and therefore people should understand. And that basically, just like women today are ashamed to wear spotted cat furs, people should be ashamed to wear ivory.
That bloody ivory is rarely recovered in the field. This small seizure happened more by good luck than good management. The poachers usually leave the rangers far behind.
Classic example, the other day they came in, they've located a gang that had killed some elephants, and they had a contact with them, fired a couple of shots and ran out of ammunition. In other words, each of them probably only had 1 or 2 rounds in their gun, and they came and borrowed ammunition from us to try and do a follow-up and try and catch the poachers.
A few years back, against the occasional poacher armed with an old-fashioned single-shot muzzle loader like this, the elephant stood a chance. But these days, against gangs of as many as 40 poachers armed with Russian fully automatic Kalashnikovs like this one, the elephant stands no chance at all. These 2 weapons were confiscated by the wildlife rangers, but unfortunately, they're just a drop in the ocean.
That Kalashnikov came from Angola, where the games children play today echo the reality of 20 years of war. The ivory from countless poached elephants has paid for the guns to wage one war after another across the continent. And those guns have in turn been used to kill yet more elephants. But the real money ends up in Hong Kong. Millions of African refugees owe their present misery to ivory traders like Mr. Poon.
To stop him is not a small thing. It's like a war, to war with another country. He's not small. He's not small. And he's taking the advantage of many poor Africans who are really, without him, they are paralyzed.
Mr. Poon has always kept well clear of the press. Briefly questioned just once about his activities, his inscrutable response was, "A man does not like to be known as a pig does not like to be fat." But here he is, Tat Hong Poon. At last, a face to the name. But the killing he funds goes on. This confidential report proves the ivory trade is out of control. It says,
"The implications for the conservation of African elephants are grim. In fact, the picture is possibly more bleak than has been painted."
No wonder CITES refused to publish the report, even though they commissioned it themselves. It goes on,
"Within a few short years, the elephant will be found only in high-security areas."
As this graph shows, whereas in 1950 there were 3 million elephants, there are only about 1 million now, and if the slaughter continues at the present rate, the elephant will be virtually extinct within 20 years. And that's why conservationists are calling for a total ban on all ivory.
It's a bloody disaster. I've been flying around the national parks, and all I see are carcasses and scared elephants running away from the aeroplane. And now, where before there used to be hundreds of elephants and you couldn't fly for more than a few minutes without seeing them, you can go for half an hour. So we're at the 11th hour, and we've got to stop this trading in ivory now. People have got to stop buying it.
But they haven't, so the killing goes on. And it was the sound of machine gun fire that brought us to an isolated corner of Luangwa National Park in Zambia. The rangers had come upon heavily armed poachers hacking the ivory from 6 dead elephants. Having run out of bullets themselves, the rangers returned with us the next day to the blood-stained and fly-blown killing fields.
So there are 4 here.
Yeah, 4 here. 1, 2, 3, 4.
And presumably that tracker... Oh, there's the other one further up the back there.
There's another one over there, the 5th one.
Presumably making a run for it. And the poachers got away?
They got away.
Did they fire on your boys?
Yes, they started firing on our men.
What with? Automatic weapons?
With automatic, yeah, they had 2 automatic weapons.
And your scouts have got single shots?
What I got from my scouts that day, one of the poachers was put as a sentry, climbed up that tree.
Right,
Then scaring from there. Scaring our scouts to come close to them.
Appalling sight. And these 3 just fell together.
Yeah, that's it. Oh, whatever, chopped down.
What, with axes or...?
With axes, yes.
And their faces just hacked away.
Yeah,
To get the ivory?
together with the ivory.
What sort of people do this?
Yeah, great people, poachers.
This is the real cost of ivory. Whatever claims Mr. Poon may make about the legitimacy of his business, he's paid the piper, and this is his gruesome tune.
So this poor beast was making a run for it. And you found the other one still further on, did you? The wounded one?
The wounded one.
Yeah.
Maybe if you went further.
Away.
Yeah. It's the one
And it's
which-
run the best part of a mile with a bullet in it before it
with the
dropped.
bullet in it, yes, before it dropped. And unfortunately, it died for nothing. It has no ivory on it.
Oh, it's a tuskless one.
Tuskless one, yeah. It was born like that. Poor and unfortunate elephant.
It's obscene.
Countries to Mr. Poon's tatting investments in Hong Kong.
Poon? Yes? Marie.
Just a moment.
And we want to talk to you about it.
Excuse me, Sapri.
No, we need to talk to him about the use of forged certificates.
Don't make a movie.
Yeah, we are making a movie. That's
We
what
are
this
not
is.
willing to do this.
You don't have to be willing.
We are not willing.
This is a program about the international ivory
We don't
trade.
we don't
And
want
all
to-
over the world, Mr. Poon's name crops up as the man
Don't
behind
make
it.
problem, huh?
Come on, Mr. Poon. It's said that almost single-handedly you'll be responsible for the extinction of the African elephant.
Excuse me, I want to close the door.
Do you?
Excuse me. Excuse me, I want to close
Well,
the door.
you two might frighten other people here who don't want to talk about what Mr. Poon has been doing, but you don't frighten us.
Excuse me.
Now, we would actually like to do an interview with Mr. Poon. If he's got,
Excuse me.
if he's got nothing to, what were you going to throw, Mr. Poon?
The facts are so overwhelming. When you have populations that have fallen by 80 or 90%, when tourists go to the parks and complain they can't see elephants, when I come back with a survey from Central Africa with only 4,000 live elephants out of the 12,000 that we saw, when the countryside is littered with rotting corpses, the facts speak.
Come on, Mr. Poon. Come on. Come on, Mr. Poon. Don't be
Excuse
stupid.
me, this... Police help! Police help! No, I called the police.
And you've set up factories in what's the smile for?
He's a thief and a man who's stealing our resources in broad daylight. I hope that the international community mounts a campaign against the Poons of this world, because they are not only destroying a valuable resource, that they're going to destroy us as a race in the end.
Tonight, the Worldwide Fund for Nature called for a government inquiry into Mr. Poon's ivory empire. Hong Kong is still a British responsibility.